Hey, check out that beauty. Hey friends, glad you could be back with me at Happy Hour at Hop World this week. And this week we are going to talk about VISTA Hops, the newest and latest greatest public variety straight from the USDA. Tip number 121, Happy Hour at Hops World. Max Raphael here. Let's do it. Well, the first thing you should know about VISTA Hops. Huge cones. Really pretty plant, really pretty cones. We have one baby VISTA plant that we planted this year. It actually got planted a little late, but it made some beautiful cones. When it was still an experimental variety, VISTA was still known as number 074. The whole correct number was 2006009-074. It was originally created in 2006 and it took till 2019 to actually become public. But all that time and all them trials really became worth it as brewers themselves made a big part in actually making VISTA a public variety. This hops is what is called a triploid. But before I can explain what a triploid is, I need to back up and explain how new hops varieties are actually made. So here comes a bit of science, folks, from a non-scientist. But I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. So we'll start at the beginning and explain how a new hops variety is actually created. Hops are dioecious. What that means is that the hops have separate plants which are considered male and female. Yes, folks, different sexes in a plant. They look similar, but when they flower very differently. First, we'll talk about the female hops plant. When a female plant flowers, a small burr is what they call it, or burrs. They have little white hairs, starts growing along the stems and the sidearms of the plant. I won't get scientific about it and name all the scientific names, but they look like this in the picture, little white hairs that they call burrs. These small white hairs eventually grow and puff out and develop into a female hops cone. And this hops cone is actually the only part of a hops plant that is used to make beer. So now we'll talk about the male hops plant. When it flowers, it grows very small, whitish, yellowish flowers in little clusters about 1/4 inch in diameter. These small flowers actually create male pollen. And in nature, the male pollen actually blows and gets carried in the wind. If the male pollen lands on one of the female little burrs or white hairs, the new cone that's going to form shortly will actually be seeded. Now, seeds are typically unwanted in hops or for making beer. They have known to give off flavors that are very undesirable. Consider that the tens of thousands of acres in Yakima Valley and Howardtown and all over the world, every one of these plants out there is a female hops plant. Wow. So really, the only use for males or seeds is to create new plants and new hops varieties. And each new seed is actually a potential new commercial variety of hops because it's going to have DNA from the mother and father and not going to be a pure clone of its parents. So back to this hops variety. The reason we started this conversation. This variety again is what is known as a triploid.
So what is a triploid? Before we go there, let me explain a normal hops plant. A typical normal hops plant, be it in nature, and more than 95% of the commercial varieties are called diploids. And di meaning two, that means that a diploid is named that because it actually has two sets of chromosomes in each of its cells. Yeah, some real science there, folks. So when breeding, the hops female mother and the male father each contribute one set of chromosomes to the new cell of the new embryo in a new hops plant. Now, besides diploids and triploids, there are hops called tetraploids. Wow! So we're jumping ahead and skipping triploids again. We're going to talk about tetraploids. By treating normal diploid baby in vitro hops plants with certain chemical, the cells end up mutating as the plant grows. They actually end up doubling the amount of sets of chromosomes in each cell in the new hops plant. Therefore, each cell now has 4 sets of chromosomes as opposed to the normal diploid, which has 2. So, we now have a diploid male with 2 sets of chromosomes per cell and a new tetraploid female with 4 sets of chromosomes per cell. What do you think would happen if we pollinate the female tetraploid with the pollen from a male diploid? What will we get? Yes, a triploid. And triploids have 3 sets of chromosomes for each cell. So interestingly enough, due to having an odd number of chromosomes, it's impossible to duplicate and provide viable seeds. So triploids are considered seedless varieties. And this is an advantage in areas where there are many farms very close by. The possibility of unwanted male plant nearby is high. I have consistently found seeds in, I'd say, 99% of the hop yards that I have visited through Yakima Valley, through Hallertau, and 5 or 6 other European countries where I've visited hop yards. They almost always have seeds from some stray male nearby. So seedless hops actually is a big advantage. Other advantages of triploids include they typically have elevated alpha and beta acids and oils higher than the original mother plant. They typically have larger cones than the mother, also which helps in the ease of picking. Typically they have better resistance to disease, and the reason that triploid hops are very much better for disease resistance is because the cones form and close much quicker than a typical diploid hops plant. In the epoch when your plant is creating burrs, it is very susceptible to downy mildew or powdery mildew that could virtually ruin your crop. And by the cones forming very quickly and closing very quickly, the chance of getting disease is minimalized greatly. Usually bigger, healthier plant, even the stems, the leaves are typically bigger than the original mother plant. And the most important thing, that they almost always have a higher yield than the mother plant that they started with. So I think that's enough science for one night. Let's get back to our original hops variety.
VISTA was creating using a tetraploid pearl. This mother plant is actually the same mother as triple pearl. So triple pearl is a true half-sister of VISTA. Now, this pearl plant originally was created using a northern brewer female and a male from Hallertau, number 63/5/27. So the genetics are a mix because they took this tetraploid female and they did open pollination with a normal diploid male, and what came of it is this triploid VISTA. So the first plant from 2006 was at the USDA research plot in Corvallis, Oregon, at the University of Oregon. And by 2010, they had already done some test brews right at the university that were highly successful. And then in 2011, there was a 96 hill plot planted in Washington, just outside of Yakima, and also a 48 hill plot planted in Oregon as a test. They continued the brewing trials, and actually at a couple of the actual beer events or conferences, they made beer using this 074, as it was called at the time, with great success. And I'll explain why it was so successful. But it continued growing out, and in 2019, finally, there were two 2-acre plots, one in Washington and one in Oregon, that gave great success. And we're going to talk about great success. How about up to 3,500 pounds per acre? Bam! Not every hop yard had the same results, but every hop yard had results way at that limit of the best commercial varieties, or even better. Now, the best part about VISTA Hops are the aromas and the flavors that it adds to your beer. We're talking pure tropical fruit, melon, papaya, maybe passion fruit, peach, pear, apple. Really clean flavors that can be added to your brew early on. Even though it is an aromatic hops, it has 11% alpha, which is typically higher than most aromatic hops, and can really give your brew a great punch. It can be used with a mix with other hops, Centennial, Cascade, for some common hops easily available. But it is strong enough to be used on its own, especially at the end of the boil if you want to get them hazy or New England IPA flavors out of it. So, without further ado, let's go out in the hop yard and check out our baby VISTA plant. Hey, hey, here it is, folks. VISTA Hops with some nice, pretty, big, giant cones. We'll show you some of the real big ones at the top of the plant. This variety of hops has 9 to 12% alpha acids, 4 to 5% beta acids, oils 1.0 to 2.0 milliliters per 100 grams, and the substitutes, if you're trying to substitute this because it's brand new and it's hard to get, I'd try Cashmere and Triumph. Them the three new ones from the USDA. So, two things that make this hops really great are the fruity tropical flavors of melon, peach, real tropical fruits. It's really a big hardy plant, has huge giant cones. We haven't planted enough to get an idea on spacing for planting or hop storage index or even the production, but it's said to overproduce, second great thing, more than the typical newer varieties of hops. So, VISTA Hops. Let's check out the plant from top to bottom. Hasta la vista, baby. So here we are, that's the top of the VISTA. It's huge cones coming down. Plenty of cones here in the middle, which is always good. Got dark green leaves, and I'd say medium green. At this point, these cones, the big ones, are really kind of open, but this plant did get stressed out due to lack of water. I was away and I had someone else watching, and they didn't realize they turned the water on correctly, and it's been really hot this winter. But this plant really, really took on the heat. It's been record heat and dry and really didn't suffer. Some of my other plants burnt all the tips. The stalks, the stems coming out of the ground, thick, already turned to wood for a 1-year-old baby plant. Looking good. Our Vista baby. Can't wait to see this baby next year. Hoo hoo hoo. Well, I really hope you enjoyed this week's tip. I really enjoyed it. How could you not? Oh my gosh. I mean, seriously. When you heat these oils up, wow. For those of you who haven't planted VISTA Hops, I highly suggest it. Not only for the beautiful, pretty plants, but also for the flavors, for the aromas, for the beer that you can make with VISTA Hops. So, in honor, we're going to drink an IPA with white peach. Really in the style of VISTA Hops. Haven't found any beer yet publicly with this hops, but we're gonna do a little dry hop addition, fresh, ba-bam. Thanks for being with me, folks. Put a thumbs up if you liked our tip. We'll see you next week. Cheers to life.